Relating entities in EF Core is crucial for building real-world applications. Whether you are designing a system to link customers to their orders, students to their courses, authors to their books, or even blogs to their posts, relationships form the backbone of any database-driven application. That is why today I have decided to talk about relationship in EF Core and show you the easiest way to handle model relationship in .NET. We're going to cover everything from one-to-one relationship, many-to-many, and also one-to-many. Keep it simple and practical. So by the end of this video, you have a solid understanding of how to define and manage relationship like a pro. So grab your keyboard and now let's jump right into this. We're going to talk about 3 types of relationship. That is one-to-one, one-to-many, and now many-to-many. Now, these relationships here are established between entities or models. So with all these, let's try to have a practical example of each type of the relationship that you see here. So make sure you have a Visual Studio opened. And aside from that, we're going to create a project. So let's do that. So we have .NET 9 project created as web API, and we need to install some packages since we're going to be handling relationship. I want to integrate SQLite database, and also I want to add Scalar API, because you know that is what we can use to read our or interact with an API. So let's install these 3 packages: EF Core, SQLite, and also Scalar.asp Netcore. So right click on solution, then with the dependencies, let's get these packages installed. So when you check again, these are the packages that we have installed. We have the EF Core, we have SQLite for database, we have the tools for database migration, and that is in Scalar for interactive API. Okay, now we have all these packages installed. The next thing that we're going to do here is let's handle this one by one. Now we have 3 types of relationship that we've seen earlier on. Let's start with one-to-one. When we say one-to-one, it means that one entity is mapped to another entity. Let's pick a user and a profile, for example. A user can have one profile. User cannot have multiple profiles. So in this case, user must match with one profile. So let's use this model. Let's form this as a model, user model, and also a profile model. And let's see how we can establish this one-to-one relationship with these 2 entities. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to handle each separately. So I'm going to delete this weather forecast control that we have in here. Then I'm going to create a new one. It's going to be a controller, but in that controller, I'm going to do everything in there. Okay. So in here, we have our one-to-one controller. If we're going to create a DB context BNet, we're going to create our models BNet. You want to handle this within a separate file, this file only. So this is going to handle all one-to-one relationship from creating models to the controller, okay? So that it doesn't mess up with the others. I want to make it simple for you to understand. That's the reason why I'm doing this. So the next thing that we're going to do here is, after we have created this model specifically, or this controller specifically for this one-to-one, let's go in and create our models. We are going to use user model and also profile model. So let's get this done. All right, so we have our two models created, two entities, and we have a user entity, we have our profile entity. Now that is the relationship one-to-one. So a user must have one profile, and one profile must have one user. So in this, how can you do that? There are two approaches of establishing relationship in .NET. We can use the Fluent API, and we can also use the conventions and navigation property. Now, the easiest way is the conventions and navigation property. If you want to have more advanced on the relationship, that is where we use the Fluent API. But well, with the conventions and navigation property, it also works well. Let's try that first. Maybe if you want me to have a video on integrating or using the Fluent API, you can put it in the comment section. So let's see how we can do this with the Fluent navigations and conversion property. So in here, since we need it is one-to-one, we need to specify this. So we're going to create a navigation in this user. How do we do it? So here we are establishing the navigation here. It means that through this user, we can get access to the profile. It is a path that we are creating here. So through this user, we can get access to the profile through this profile object that we have specified. But there's one problem here. Anytime that we create this and we want to add a data to the database, if you do not make this as nullable, it means you need to provide this profile info when adding user. It will make this as a required. So all the time, depending on the use case, but the best way is to make this as nullable so that even if you do not provide values for this, you only provide values for the two properties here, and it's going to work. So let's make this as nullable. Now, once you have this established, let's also create the same connection in the profile. Now, this user here is independent. It tells you that you can add a user data to the table without providing profile. But when it comes to the profile, it is dependent. It depends on the user. It tells us that before profile will be created, a user must have been created already. So you can provide the user ID. How do we do it? So the next thing to do here is we need to also create the same user, which is the navigation property. Make it as nullable as explained earlier on. And the next thing here is you need to create a foreign key. Foreign key is any primary key of another entity which is found in a different table. This table has its own primary key, that is its ID. And it's going to have another key here, which won't be a primary key, but rather a foreign key. And it is referencing this user ID. If I decide to make this as ID, you can see I have already ID here. So that's the reason why I am looking as an ID. And I want to make it an explicit so that as soon as you get it, you know that, okay, fine, that's referencing the user ID. That's the reason why I joined the user and now the ID. So I can have user ID. You see? So we have the navigation specified, the same navigation specified here, making it nullable so that you do not provide the user model or the profile model when adding each entity to database. And here you specify a user ID, which is a required property. Before you add profile, you must provide the user ID. It means user must be created, and through that you provide the user ID to this, and I'll add it. But this is one-to-one. How would you know that this is one-to-one? After establishing this relationship, the migration father is going to create, we're going to read that. It's going to create an index, whereby this index, this column is going to be unique. So this column here to be unique. Let's see. When you do that, you now understand this properly. Don't worry. Once you have this model created, we need to create a DB context, isn't it? Now that is where we're going to specify our table and the table names and the specific column that's going to use. So in here, let's have our DB context created. So you can see from here, we have a DB context created. We create a class of it. Then we're going to create constructor here, and I'm passing this app DB context. Well, we can decide to use the primary constructor. You click on this and use primary constructor to have it just a line. And the next thing that we're doing here, you can see we are creating our DB set. These are the table names that we are creating. It's going to use this model, the properties as a column. So in here we have the users and we have the profile. The reason why we made this is when we create the normal one, you're going to have it as nullable. So in order to get rid of that, we can also call this to make sure it gets rid of that nullable that it does show anytime that you use the default one. Let me show you the default one, and I believe that is what we have been using. So DB set. Then so with DB set, you pass in this user, then you say users. So you can see here nullable property. So you can decide to set this to default to get rid of that, or you can decide to use this. But let's go with this. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go and register this in our program.cs file so we can perform migration. So on top here, so you can see from here that we have created our connection string. So since we're using the SQLite, the connection string is quite simple. We create a data source, and now there's going to be a file attached to our application. The name is going to be a relationship or relations.db. Okay, so now we are good to go. Let's go and perform migration. So I'm going to copy this one-to-one. Then before we do that, let's go and build this project. So now that is set, let's go and add migration. Now you can see from here, the file has been created. That is a class of one-to-one, which is found in the migration folder automatically created. So when you check your solution, you can see that we have it over here. Now let's go and read through it. We're having two tables here. So you can see model migration builder is creating two tables. This is the first table. The name here, it is users. The second name here, it is profile, as we specify in a DB context. Now check it out. Let's go into details. The next one here, it is we are specifying the number of or the column that it should create. So we are defining the columns. In users, we are having two columns, ID and our username. And definitely we know that with having an ID, EF core automatically is going to see the database for us as an ID with the primary key. Here it is saying it's an auto increment is set to true. So it means that anytime that you provide ID to the table, it does add the ID by 1. Okay, then we have the username, which is a string and it's a text type. Great. Now when you come here, that's where we have our first constraint. That's the primary key. In order for this ID to be used as a primary key, there must be a constraint, and that is what we have in here. So it is using the primary key here, or the ID, as a primary key. So it's using this ID that we created as a primary key, and the name here is known as the PK users. Good. Now check it. With the same thing applies to the profile. We have the columns ID and our bio here, and now we have user ID, because these are the three properties that we created in that profile class. Now in that, it needs to use this ID as a primary key. So when you go to a constraint, it has a primary key. But since we added another key as a foreign key, check it out. We are having it as a foreign key. Then this is a name. And now it is referencing the column of what? This user ID. So this is a user ID. And now this is coming from a principal table. Which principal table? It is coming from this. Because we introduced the navigations property, it is able to identify the table that is referencing it to. So that's the principal table of users. And now which ID or which column of the principal table is he referencing in here? This user ID definitely is referencing the ID of this user table. So when we check our one-on-one class, we see from this user, it is referencing this ID, which is found in here as user ID, and that is a foreign key here. Now check the next one. After doing this, the next thing here, it is the index. It is creating this. This is the name of the index. It is creating to this table. The column here, it is the user ID, which is of course a foreign key referencing the user's table, and it is creating the uniqueness of this. So check here. Here it is set to true. That's a unique. It tells us that anytime that you create a model, anytime that you add record to the table, the profile must have only one user. So you cannot have two users having the same profile or vice versa. You get it? So that's the reason why it is setting the unique here to true. Good. And now with this, if you want to drop them, we are not much actually focused here. We don't want to drop it. So these are the things that we need to understand. Now that this has been created, we need to make sure this does work. So how do we do it? By updating the database. So write in update database. So after successful running and implementation of this, then we go to the same one-on-one class. Let's create specify a controller. Now in this controller, we need an endpoint to handle that. So I have already prepared an endpoint for adding user and also getting user and stuff. So I prepared this beforehand, so don't worry. We need to integrate, or we need to inject our app.db context, and now say this is context here in the constructor. So here you can see from this we having these users. If you want to create user, we get the users here, then you pass in this user. Remember that this user here, it is independent, it can stand on its own. You don't need to provide any value to it or any foreign key when adding. Okay, so we save it and I return okay. Now let's say on getting this users. Now since we have the navigation properties specified in users, we can include the profile. So in case what's here, you can see we get this user, we have this profile included. So in case you want to get the profile of this user, we don't need to be going to this profile to search for this user, although you can do that. But since we have this navigation property defined, all that you need to do here is use this include and specify the profile, and all the users that we have here, they are going to come with their respective profile. That's amazing. Good. So use this simple to make it work. Okay, now let's see on how we can get profile. It's the same thing, so we can just copy and paste this and I'll change it. So we add profile and it is the same thing. So the same thing, just that I change here to profile. That is a table name. And let's go and get profile. And now since we do also have the navigation property included in the profile, which is from the user, we can also include the user. So that is exactly what I'm doing here. So if I get a profile, I can also get a respective user who has this profile. Okay, I can get it attached to this using the include. Good. So now this is working now. Let's run this application and check it out. But before this can work, I think we need to configure our scaler so we can have the interactive UI. Go to program. Let's include the using or the namespace. After doing that, you come to the middleware pipeline, and then we can go and say the app.map scalar API reference, and that is all. So very simple way to configure. Let's run this. And one thing is, this will not open the browser directly. If you want to do that, let's go to solution, go to the properties, line settings, and in the HTTPS, you see that here it is having HTTPS and now HTTP. So this can run on both. Maybe we can decide to remove one. We want to run only on HTTPS for now. And after we are done with this, we need to specify the launch URL. And here we're going to say it is scalar/v1. So this is the route. And launch from browser, let's change or modify this to true. And now we are good. Click on this and now let's check it out. So you can see that we are in here, EF core relationships or relation in .NET. Now when you check here, you can see we have in our endpoint, we have our post get, right? That is the add user, get user, add profile, get profile. Currently we have no record, so let's go and add user. So click on test run. Then here, since we made this as null, you can decide to get rid of this profile and auto seed. So this is going to increase this by 1 as soon as we provide it. So you do not need to provide that. Let's say here the username that we want. What's the username? Let's say this is Netcode. So that is the username. And let's say, so we have an error here and it's saying that expecting double quote, so add user. Let's execute this. Okay, so this should be out. Now send it again. And now let's wait and see. We have it of 200. Okay, let's add another one. That is hub. Click on this. And we also have it. So if I click on get all, see what happens. So get all users, click on execute. And I can see from here, we are having ID and IDs here as what 1 and 2. We have the usernames here, but the profile it is not because we haven't added any profile yet. Let's go and add profile, and we need to add user before you can add profile. I hope you get that. Now let's go and add it. So users, we can get rid of this one because you don't need that. Then user ID, we don't need it because it's going to seed it for us. Now bio here it is, this is Netcode bio. And here we're going to say that this, I think should be in bracket. Okay. Then we have the user ID as 1. So this is for Netcode, and the user ID is 1. Let's click on send. And now we have 200. Okay. Now the same thing. Let's say if you want to have user ID, let's specify as hub. We have added one already, and now we are referencing the same thing. Bear in mind that we must have an issue here because this is 1-to-1. We have assigned this user ID to a profile already. So if I try to send this, let's see what happens here. We must have an exception. Let's wait. Okay, so it is hit. Let's check it up. You see that an error occurred while saving the empty changes. So unique constraint failed. So it tells you that 1-on-1 is 1:1. So this will not work because we have already added or assigned that to another record. So user ID, if I send this to 2, this will also work. So you can see we have it done. Now click on get profile, or let's click on get users. And now since we have a profile added, we're going to have the profile also included in the response. Click on send. And see what you're having. We're having this, yes, serializer cyclic detected. Good. Now with this, it does happen because if you check the trend, go to this, let's say get profile. I think we can get it from the model. Let's check if you check the trend here, you can see that anytime that we call this get user has a navigation property of profile. So it will go into this profile and now get this profile. Now get this profile also have a navigation of user. So it also go into this and I get user. The same user also has a navigation of profile. So to come and I get profile. And that's the same. So to skip this, to tell the EF core to get rid of that, to go in and unpick it once and for all, we can issue ignore JSON attribute here. But if we issue this attribute, unless you do it all in your models that you're going to create in the future, which has we're going to have models in it or relationships in it. So in order to do that, we need to go to our program.cs file and I configure that as a service once and for all. How do we do it? Let's go to our service of adding controller, and now we need to add JSON options. So in here, we're going to say that with this JSON options, we need to specify, and now we say x dot, we're going to have JSON serializer options, then dot reference handler, and we want to set this to system.text .json serialization .reference handler .ignore cycles. So that is what we want. Okay, so you make sure you add this service. Now that we are good, I think we can go ahead and rerun this, and that issue must be solved. Now let's go and check this out. So from get user test request, send this request. Now let's wait and see the response that we're going to get. Okay, so check it out. You can see from here, let me just minimize it so you can see it well. Check it out. We have an ID and IDs over here as ID and 2. That's great. We know that as a primary keys. The next one that we have here, it is the names. And as you can see from here, we have the Netcode and Netcode-Hub. That is what you provided. Now, since we added include profile, it has added that. This is the profile ID, and then that is the biodata. So you can see here, it also reference to user, but since we have this user already, we ignore that using the service that we registered. And we have this user ID, that is 1, and which is referencing to this. So this is a foreign key, and it is referencing the primary key of this user ID. Good. So we see this working, we are good. Now, when we check the next one, that is get profile, it's also going to be same. We're going to get a profile and also attach the user. So this is a profile ID of 1. It's referencing which user. We have this user. Since we also added the include, we also have the same user. So that is a one-to-one. I believe this is clear. Great. Now let's go to one-to-many or many-to-one. This happens between two entities, whereby one entity can be used multiple times in another entity, but the other entity can be used once. So you see that's a one-to-many or many-to-one. Let's take let's say a blog and a post, for example. A blog can have many posts, right? And many posts can have one blog. Many posts can have one blog, and now one blog can have many posts. Let's see how we can establish this one-to-many and our many-to-one relationship between these models. So you can see from here, we have our models created over here. Now, how do we specify one-to-many, the relationship? We want to have one blog to many posts, because a blog can have many posts, isn't it? And many posts can have one blog. So in doing this, we need to specify the navigations over here. So we can use iCollection, and we specify the post. And here too, if you do not make this as nullable, it means that anytime that you are adding blocks, you need to provide a list of posts. We don't want to do that. So let's make this as nullable, and now let's give it a name as post. Okay, so here you can say one block gonna have many posts, or many posts gonna have one block. So one block here having many posts. That's a one-to-many. Now when you go to the post, we need to also make sure we have the reference set up here. And now with this block here is independent. You can add this block, but when you come to the post, before you add post, you must provide a block ID. So this is independent. Okay, so that is independent here, and now this is dependent. So this post depends on this block. Okay, and so before you add the post, you must provide a block ID. But this is independent because you can add this without necessarily providing an ID or providing a list or anything. You can just go straight and add this. So if this does not exist, you cannot go ahead and create post. blog must exist first before you can go ahead and then create posts. I believe this is clear. Now let's see how we can do this. We need to also provide a navigation property. So here we're going to say that we have our blog, and also make this as nullable so you do not provide values when adding post, and say this is blog. Now let's also provide the foreign key, which is integer, and we're going to say blog ID. I've already explained this already, so you know what this means. So you can see we are having this navigation property, but this you're not going to, or we cannot navigate and get this list. But through the post, we can get the blog ID because of the navigation property that we have specified over here. Now, once you are done with this, which is here, we have many to one, and then we have one to many. What's the next thing to do? Let's create our, we can go to our one-to-one and add this. So this one maybe we can do. Let's go ahead and let's make this as a partial class. Then let's come to the one-to-many and create same. So you can see from here too, since we have a partial class, we do not need to specify the constructor because it has been specified once in the one-to-one. So in here, you can see we having our blocks and we having our post, right? So that's a DB set that we have. After we are done with this, we need to also add migration. So let's go and do same. Now let's go and look at the file which has been created. We are creating the blocks and our posts, and I believe you are aware. We having the name specified, we having the name also, and we having the columns as ID and title. We have the same column ID, title, no ID, content, and our block ID. We have our constraint, which is the primary key, and now in the post we have our constraint. We have two constraints, the primary key and the foreign key. You understand this already based on the first one, isn't it? And also we having an index. So with this index, you see we are not having any unique index here. We are having a column referencing which is our block ID, which is our foreign key. So that's our index that is creating. It tells you that here we do not enforce the uniqueness of a column or of a foreign key. So we can repeat this foreign key multiple times to a different record. Okay, let's go and update our database. And now while this has been updated and run successfully, we're going to create our endpoint. So I've already created an endpoint. So we go to one-to-many, and now in our endpoint, let's inject a DB context as usual. So let's have a method so we can add block. We need to also get blocks. Now you can see from here, when getting blocks, we want to include the post, because that is where we are making a reference. So we want to get block and I get post. Now we are adding this so we can check and see something. Okay, so let's include the post. Then let's go and also add post. So here you can create a post, and I think here should be post, not profile. And then let's also get post. Now in getting post, I also added, we check this, I also added the block. Now let's go and run this and check this out. So we're going to provide records of values for each. After that, we're going to try to get, and now see the differences. Now with the one-to-many, if you use one-to-many, can you get what's the one-to-many? So when you use one-to-many from here, can we get post? Can we get this as navigation property of this post, or we can't? And can we get the block here from the post? Let's check it out. So now from here we have one-to-many, And let's add block first. So with this, post is null, so we can get rid of this. We also don't need an ID. So this is block 1. Let's send this, and okay, it has been created. Let's go and get block. We have it. So post is null because we haven't attached to any post. Let's go and add post. And now with this, we don't need to provide block because we made it as null. We need a block ID of 1 and our content. So this is block 1 content. Now send this, and it is gone. We can add another one, but then you need to provide another block. So we have block ID content 1. So this is block 1 content, let's say 2. And let's see, because it is also, let's wait and see what will happen. We are having an issue, and I'll check it up. So here we are saying unique constraint field post.id. So here we have a unique constraint. Now, what is actually happening? When you go to our one-to-many, you can see from here, we're having this post. That is, many of these posts can have one block. Many of these posts can have one block, isn't it? That's why we are having this block and now post. So when you create, you're having this post here. So when you create a record for block, you can use the ID multiple times in creating post. Is that what we did? If I create this ID, should be out. Now let's continue. Let's continue this. Okay. This error is coming from saving this post.id. That's an ID. Now we the same thing, and now we have it. So the same block ID, we can create multiple posts. That is one-to-many. So this is 3. Send. We have it. So we can create another one as 4, and I also have it. Let's click on get post, and I'll check it up. Let me close this because this must be null. Now we have an ID of 1. That is the content here. So this is the post. Now it's having block. Because of the include, we have the ID. This is the title of it. And now this block also has a list of posts. That's what we have here. So we don't need to. That's why it is null. Now when you check this, we also have this ID of 2. That is coming from this post. So we have, you want to get post here. There's an ID of 1. We have this block. Now this block has an ID of 1, which is block 1. If I minimize this, you can see we are having this block ID. Since I am using include, it's going to include the post in this block. If I open this block, it has a block ID, and then the post here is null because of the cyclic reference that we added. Now, when you check the next one, it's the same thing as you can see. So you have a block ID. There's block 1 content. There's block 1 content 2, and it's the same. So you can see that here we have been able to get all posts under a specific block, or block with all posts. We've been able to do that. Okay, let's see. What's the next one to talk about? That is a many-to-many. Many-to-many here is like having a student and courses. You know, students can be assigned to many courses, and many courses can be assigned to student. So let's say if I have been assigned by 3 courses, the next student can also be assigned by the same courses. Now the same courses can be assigned by different students. You see, so that's a many to many. Let's use course and student to understand this well. So I'm going to create another file here. In that, we need to create our class. Now we're going to have 2 modules here. For now, we're going to have more than that, but let's maintain these 2 for now. So let's have a student and let's have course. So I think student should have name, not title. Okay, so course, you have the title instead. Okay, so we have a student and we have course modules created. Now with this, we want to have one to many to many. So in order to work with navigation property, we need to create a third class. Now this third class is going to combine the student and now the course together, so we can put it as a model. And now this model will be used as a DB set, so we can have a specific table to this. So you can see from here, we have an ID which will be used as a primary key, in that we specify the composite key. So these are 2 primary keys found in the separate course and student tables. And in that we want to create a navigation property so we can navigate to the specific model. So we create a student and then we create course. So we have a course student. Good. Now that we are done with this, we need to go into this course and make sure we have this reference here using iCollection course student. And we say this is courses and now student, because this is going to handle a lot of courses and a lot of students as well. Now let's make this as also null, so we are not required to provide values when adding course. Let's grab this and I'll do same to the student. Make sure you make it as null, so you are not required to also add same. Good. So now that we are done with this, let's go and create a DB set. Okay, so you can see from here that we also create a course student model, so we can have a table. Now, I mean that what we want to focus here is actually these 2 guys here, student ID and course ID. These are navigation properties, so we don't need to provide values for this. But if we do not use this, if we do not make them as null, you'll be forced to provide values for this. But that is not what we want to focus. So we want to provide IDs for the student ID and course ID. And anytime that we use course student, we can get reference to, we can use this include method to include the student and the course, because we have them navigated or referenced here. Let's see. So after we are done with this, let's go and add migration to this and see what's going to happen here. So if I need to go to this migration file which has been created, you can see we are having courses and now students. These are the respective columns. The same thing, and now we have a constraint which is primary key, and the same thing applies here. Now go to the third one, that is the create courses student table. It's a combination of the 2 tables. So we have an ID which is a primary key automatically. We have a student ID and a course ID. That is what we're going to provide values for. Then we have a constraint. We have the primary key over here. Then we have a foreign key. So because we are having 2 foreign keys. And then lastly here we have this on delete. So if I click on delete, if I delete any key here, it's going to delete all the respective records in the courses and on the student, because we have this as cascade. Then the next thing that we're going to do here is we have the create index. So you can see it is creating index for both tables. So we have a course student, and we have the same thing for student ID and for course ID. Good. Let's update it. So that is this done. So we need to go in there and create a controller and endpoint to handle that. I have an add student endpoint on top. Let's have it because I have it prepared already. So this is add students, and I believe you know we need to include our AppDB context class. Let's inject it. After adding student, you know the next one is get student. Let's get student. So we include the courses and our student. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do here is we need to also add the course. So this is going to give us a detailed record. Okay, then here we're going to add course. Then we also going to get course. And the last one is we're going to also add course student. That's how you provide the student ID and the course ID. So we also add course student, and at the end we need to also get same course student. And in here, from this get course student, since we have reference course and our student, check here. Since we have reference course and our student, we can include this. So if I have the student ID, I'm going to have that student detailed here. This course ID also going to have the same course detailed here for each record. So we need to include the courses and the students here, depending on the use case. But here in this scenario, that is what you want. You want to get the details of the course and also the student as well. So we get them. Okay, so let's go and run this and check it out. So when you look at this, we have our many to many. First of all, let's go and add student. So test this out. And now we don't need to add course this. So in a normal sense, you should use DTOs to handle, so we can get rid of all this. We need only name here. So the name is, this is Netcode. That is the name of this student. It's going to be added. Let's see. Okay. Let's add another one. Netcode-Hub as a student. Then let's go and add so get student. We need to get our students. Courses is not because you haven't added any course yet. Let's go and add course. So for the course, we need only the course name. So you're going to say this is business admin. Let's add this. This is IT admin. Let's add this too. So we have course of 1 and 2. So if I click on get courses, let's see. Now I have the business admin and the IT admin. So these are the courses with referencing course student as now. Okay. Now let's go and add course student. So, I should have added the correct values. Okay, so here we are not going to add student. We made it as null. Do you remember? The same thing applies to the course. So let's get rid of the student and the course. Now we don't need to provide an ID because it will be done for us automatically. The next thing is, you see, we are having student ID and now we are having course ID. 1. So Netcode is having business admin. So send this. It has been added. The next thing is Netcode-Hub, that is ID 2, is having an IT admin 2. See. Now the same course, Netcode-Hub is having business admin. So having all the 2 courses. Done. The same person, so here Netcode is also having the second IT admin 2. So you can see we've assigned the 2 courses to each of the students here. So each student is having 2 courses. Now, how do we get the student, course, and also the name? How do you get details of all? That is where this last method comes in. Now, when you have a look with the explanation or the details, how we did it, you can see we're including course and we're including student. And I want to check it, since we have this student and our course, it's going to go to the record and I'll grab this course detailed, go to student and I'll grab the student detailed for each record and I'll return. Check it out. So click on this and I'll send it. And I'll see what happened. Now I can see from here, this is for student and this is for course. You see? So student ID here, it is 1. The course ID is 1. So who is that person? What is the course? Let's go to the detail. So student, who is the student? That is Netcode. What is the course here? Open the course. It is business admin. Now aside from that, we have student ID of 1. Check here. We have student ID of 2. The course ID is 2. And now check it up. And now the student ID is 2. So who is that student? Netcode-Hub. And here, if I close this, who is the course? It is a IT admin. That is a course, right? Now check the next one. Student ID of 2, course ID is 1. We know student ID of 2 is Netcode-Hub. And now the course here, it is what? Business admin. The same person. The next person, student ID 1, and now the course ID 2. Student ID is student is what? Netcode from the student. And now the course is what? IT admin. You see? So that is what we are doing. So you see, we are having 4 records. So that's a 1, 2, 3, 4. Because each student has been assigned with 2 courses. And now we can have the student details and now the course details in just a click. I believe if you've understood how to implement one-to-one, many-to-many, and a one-to-many relationship in eCommerce. All right, so that is it. I hope you enjoyed this as well as I enjoyed it. And stay tuned for more and see you again. Till then, take care.